want to acknowledge that kluge-ruhe is located on the land of the Monacan Nation, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And since we're all joining from locations around the world, I just want to acknowledge all of the Indigenous nations where each of us are located. And I encourage you, if you don't know who your local Indigenous people are, that you find out and that you learn more about them and their culture and how you can support them. So welcome to the second webinar in a series where we are hearing from artists about their new and recent work, what it's been like for them in these strange times that we're living in, and also what new ideas they might be exploring in their arts practice. I'm really excited to introduce Julie Gough today. I was really honored to get to spend a good amount of time with Julie when she was here in 2017, about 2.5 years ago. And I learned a lot from her, and I am really impressed with her work in so many ways. So I'm going to start with a quick introduction of her, and then I'm going to hand it over to her without much delay. So Julie Gough is a woman of Trawlwoolway, Irish and Scottish heritage. She holds a doctorate and a bachelor's in visual arts from the University of Tasmania, a master's degree from Goldsmiths College at University of London, a bachelor's visual arts from Curtin University, and a bachelor's in Prehistory and English Literature from the University of Western Australia. Since 1994, her work has been exhibited in about 130 exhibitions, but maybe that's more now, Julie. Maybe it's closer to 150. I think that number was from a couple of years ago. And her work is also held in most Australian state and national gallery collections, and she's represented by Beck Gallery in Hobart. So without further delay, I'll let you go in. I'll let you take the screen. So Julie, if you just wanna, I'm gonna stop sharing, and then you can start your sharing, and we'll be good to go.
Got my sharing screen. Oh yeah, try that. Oh yeah, we've got PowerPoint up. Yeah,
perfect.
Exciting. Oh, maybe close that. Yeah, so thanks so much, Lauren and Fenella, Margot. It was wonderful to be connecting again after all this time. So I know there's been Facebook kind of moments, but this is excellent too. It's almost like being there in a sense. So yeah, I'm on Mawinana land, and this is Hobart in the south of the world, really, south of Tasmania as well, where I live. And I'm an artist, but also I work as a curator for the last couple of years, part-time in Hobart at the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery. My country is Tebrikunna in far northeastern Tasmania. It's my traditional country, and my people, as Lauren mentioned, are Trawlwoolway people. My mum and my family have lived in the Devonport region since the 1840s, though, which is in the north of this state, which is 4 hours drive from here. So it's been a bit of a wait because we've been trapped in our homes pretty much until this weekend. We've got a bit of freedom here, so then people are starting to drive around and visit family again, which is great. I've got a couple of notes so I can stay on track, and I've got a watch, so I try and not take 7 hours to talk through some of these points. So Lauren asked me sort of 3 loose questions to respond to today, which kind of helps as a bit of structure. So I've got a lot of slides, and some will run automatically. And the first is about COVID and what it's been like for me over here in Tasmania. So yeah, our island is about the size of, actually, Tasmania about the size of Ireland, the island called Ireland, and yeah, we have 500,000 people. And I think that we're very fortunate that our state government closed the borders pretty early. So we had 225 or some cases, I think, of COVID. And sadly, we had about, I think, 12 people passed away who were mostly elderly. At the moment, we have four live cases of COVID-19 here. So we're just watching the world in horror, and also with what's happening now over where you are in the US in terms of riots and bring what's happening to try and bring justice to the States. So yeah, we just feel a little bit isolated, literally, from the world, and not just since January, really. I've been not traveling that far. So I'm going to start with these slides, which are some of what was happening pre-COVID and before I felt kind of locked down in my home, pretty much. So this is my country in northeastern Tasmania. This is part of Trawlwoolway country, Tebrikunna. So very coastal and scrub and heath, and extremely powerful for me. Very, I can hear, I hear, voices from long ago when I'm there, but also time does seem a bit irrelevant. So it's all collapsing into being now and then together. This is in more in the middle. This is around Avondale, and also a colonial property I'll speak about later. The trees at the bottom, a haunted place. This is me looking like I am kind of out there, which I'm not. But the best moments for kind of sustaining are to be out on country. We call it country. So just connecting with country as a being, as us, really. So one of the amazing burl on the side of the tree in that place. This is my brother and my mum in these shots, and family members. And one of our ancestor, Manalagenna, as a watercolour, and he was painted there in, I think, 1831, the top left. So, and the importance, this was about fire and the importance of gathering and as nurturing as well, and how much this has not been happening in a sense of being, beyond very immediate families in our homes. So I'm looking forward very much to these happening more again. Family activities and gatherings, and making artworks with family. So that was with I work with my brother and mother, and this work with also my brother and myself, where we are out together and make films of some of our escapades. And so that's it's sort of strange, and like I can hardly believe that now, seeing I've been sort of trapped inside eating carbs all day for several months. And there also this work called The Traveller. So filmmaking's come to a bit of a halt, and that's been one of my primary modes or art outputs have been films. I'm working with the editor at the moment, though, completing one from footage made just prior to shutdown or lockdown. Even my first video was about driving this island and trying to work out what happened to all our land that the colonists were gifted when they arrived. So I'm going there, and this is home country, northeast again, where I filmed the impact of so-called eco-tourists continually parading across our country, and I think taking a bit of its essence away each time and leaving some of their own, which I just posit is a bit problematic. And colonial properties, which I'll speak again about near the end, which is very much a focus of my works, and increasingly so since I came back from kluge-ruhe. So I think I find this really interesting, the idea of plantation or plantation estates and the correspondence with colonial estates here in Tasmania. So I just feeling homesick to get out of my house, though, when I look at these images. And these visits to museums. Have been really fortunate over the years to visit our cultural objects made by ancestors in different places around the world, and that's also come to a halt, though I do work in a museum where we are surrounded by also our cultural objects, but also the great questioning that comes with what are these institutions, what do they represent, how are they structured and constructed, and why, and how do they fit in today's world. And so there's lots of questions, and I think communication ahead for all of us about such entities. So that was a little kind of things I miss and what's happening during COVID or not happening in a way. And then I thought I could, I've got, for some reason, I accidentally chose 100 slides, 100, they were my phone photographs while I was in the US. And that was from, I think it looks like late October to mid-December 2017. So I think I had, maybe it was 6 weeks. I'm not sure. Was it a month? Was it 6 weeks? I think.
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
But did you
4
travel
weeks.
anywhere afterward? Maybe you traveled afterwards.
Yeah, I did. I had an Amtrak experience, which I love trains. In fact, that's some kind of gloomy feeling I have perpetually, is that Tasmania removed its public train system. So, and buses just don't cut it for me. So, yeah, my joy of traveling other places is train travel. And so, yeah, I went to Philadelphia. Which order would have that been? I went Washington and Philadelphia, and for some reason I caught a train then all the way to Montauk. I didn't get off it. I sort of went bypassed New York, but then I came back to New York City. But yeah, I went to Montauk because I'm just going into this segue moment for some reason. But Montauk, because I'd read that the original sea captain, the crazy guy out of Jaws, you know, who was just, you know, going to ram every giant shark he came upon, he was from Montauk. And I thought, what kind of place produces a boat captain like that? I better go there. And that then it made sense, really, after I went there, that he came from Montauk. Yeah, because it's those edge of the world promontories that are really fascinating. It's like the end of the piers in those coastal towns in England in winter, where you know, crazy things can happen. And so yeah, that was, I think, just so fortunate to have had a few residency experiences where they do give you rest, which is needed, but they also allow that freedom to take in things you would never even know are there waiting for you. So yeah, what was I? Oh yeah, 100 slides. So these are, I'll just wait, sorry, I shouldn't talk, I should just press. I don't know if these will do the 8-second thing. Right. The first slide was when I arrived at kluge-ruhe, and there was the Aboriginal flag. It was just amazing feeling to look at that flag and feel like, okay, I think and meet you all working there and realize that you're on our page, and yeah, we're in your hearts, and that really matters when you're in so far. And it's such an epic journey to get to kluge-ruhe because of the landing at LAX, which I don't recommend to anybody ever, to get off at that airport for any reason. So, but by the time I made it to kluge, because I think I had 2 more flights after that. I had, on the same, oh my God, same trip to get through was, maybe I was on 4 planes from Tasmania. I don't know what, it's like a Charles Bronson Death Wish movie to try it, to try it in one stretch like that. But so the flag really helped in the next morning. And how will it be? These aren't changing, are they? I think maybe the 8 minutes. Oh yeah, they are. Yeah, okay. So then what was happening was, so this will take about 12 minutes or so, I think, to subject you to my phone photographs, which show my state of mind, which seems to revolve around food, but also just the strangeness of things. It was fascinating, the cost of spices. I'm not sure what's going on there, because I kind of practically spoon in cardamom, so it's like maybe it's like the movie June, like the spice. But they seem to be quite long, 8 seconds.
You should be able to press your arrow button or just click it.
Let's do that. I think the first one did change. So then I was also just realizing how much you're landing in a kind of like another planet, and you're absorbing everything, like in the supermarket aisles. Oh, what are the texts that are seen as important to impart information to these children? And that was very fascinating, because, sort of Jesus was next to Steve Jobs up there and stuff. And I bought the Underground Railroad, and I passed that. That's on its own journey around to pass that on to people to pass around. But yeah, I wish I got the whole set. It's just, I wonder what happens with these. If you read all of this, you know, because you've got Jane Goodall next to George Lucas. And I'm like, is that, I mean, I'm not saying, it's sort of like, is that, yeah, what is that, this world that we're in? And who determines these titles, but also how are they, and how they're ordered up there. How would you order these? Yeah, so yeah, I didn't stand there for a day and order them, but there was a temptation to play with them, but then I might be arrested. So let's move on to the buses. Oh my God, just like South Park, that was really astounding. And then this really happened pretty quickly. I was taken on the tour of the town, Charlottesville, and there was the statue in question covered. I can't remember the name of who is the Confederate who
Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, thank you. And to cover someone in basically a giant garbag, I'm like, wow, what a statement. I was very impressed with that. And so yeah, and then I'll come to some more images later which show how people started to approach and probably spend more time in over 100 years at that covered statue than anyone had done when it was uncovered. So it became this pilgrimage site to what looks like a kind of Christo artwork, who's just passed, but also leaving their own thoughts at its base. But also, I'd arrived at a place that had people lethally suffered in Charlottesville. I'm not sure how much earlier before my arrival that occurred, but Lauren, do you know? So
yeah, it would have been about 3 or 4 months before.
Yeah. And that's the time before that I had been to the US was 5 months after 9/11. I arrived for another art residency. So I seem to have arrived at places that are different than they were if I'd come a year earlier. So that's this. I was then sort of coming upon more and more statues that are problematic in Charlottesville, and thinking also about how many are across the world, colonized countries, noticing the high level of conversations happening in the university campus, and interested in what's being produced and presented there. And then that later became, then I was later involved in the Monumental Meanings symposium, so about monuments, about these statues in terms of Native American presence on statues there. And then I was also invited and really fortunate to participate in campus programs and meeting students. So the archaeology and the ground and sort of what lies beneath the campus, and learning a lot about enslavement, and also terminology such as that, because I didn't even know the term enslaved. I just had been brought up in language that was about slaves and slavery, and not thinking about it from the perspective of those peoples that aren't only to be defined as that in their, for their whole lives as slaves. But so there's archaeology, and so very quickly learning, I think more though about the history of enslavement, and also the wealthy and the vast estates and slavery as an entity. So it's very hard to I can't imagine anyone could avoid this at all if they're in Virginia. All colours. So revisiting the Lee, draped Lee, and I think I've got some closer ones. And so things started to happen, and also from all angles and all perspectives. and readings about buying into freedom and rights and left and right wing. Very interesting. Then back to food. No. A lot of people say this when you're in another country, that you just sort of wander around supermarkets for hours. I'm not sure how that happens, but it kind of does. I don't know. I think it's a bit of a caper culture over there in Virginia. I don't think I've ever seen more than one brand and jar of capers in my life over here. So I don't know what that is, but it kind of looks retro.
Corn.
Those crackers. Yeah, the flag, that became pretty evident pretty quickly. So I think I've seen like 3 houses in my life in Australia with an Australian flag. So it's just another fascination. The flag as an entity, like as such an entity, was really fascinating. Yeah, that you can buy. I think these are eggs without their shells that have been boiled. So that looked scary. I was uncertain about that, but I was just thinking about food, and then everything was fascinating. I think that supermarket was really worried about me and my kind of wanderings. So then I was fortunate that we were I was taken to 2 major plantation estates of former presidents, and my background, one of my kind of employment backgrounds, but interest is interpretation. And I was an interpretation officer in national parks here in Tasmania for a while. So this is, at least this got me away from the supermarkets. So I was able to kind of investigate how people are producing and responding and updating interpretation to consider the lives of the enslaved peoples on these estates. And so it's really important. So it looks more like a kind of rock star. It's very Jefferson. Went on the tours, and just becomes really evident what's lacking in Australia in terms of interpretation and consideration of what's been enacted here, and in terms of on our peoples, so First Peoples, Aboriginal peoples here, and what the possibilities might be if we want to engage in this manner, or what manner on large estates that are open for tourism here. Just going through quickly. Food again. I wish I'd bought these books, Constitution.
Really quick, I just want to jump in here because I think some of our audience may not know. So you're saying that Monticello might be an example of how larger estates or plantation estates in Australia might engage with telling the Indigenous perspective of that place.
Yeah. Well, not so many are open to the public in the same manner, but it's becoming something that is happening, where some of these estates here become wineries or producers of olive oil or just different products. Yeah, so they open in that manner for tours, and then they tend to put a little bit out about their colonial origins in glowing terms, and so there is definitely space for inclusion of with and by Aboriginal peoples. I'd suggest is pretty imperative about what these places are. They're not, there's kind of an intentionality here to erase whose land what happened the first 30 years when most Aboriginal peoples were removed from mainland Tasmania or killed. So, but this being in Virginia really, and kluge-ruhe really opened my eyes to how it's being attended to now. And I think that maybe 5 years ago, it wasn't to that level of interpretive inclusion of stories, and in a perspective that I'm not clear on I would like to know more about the background to the interpretation at these places, but I think that they were involving, Aboriginal Aboriginal enslaved descendants advisory groups, from what I could pick up from
Right.
Monticello. And yeah.
No, that's helpful context.
Yeah. So then this was next to I've gone back again. This was next to the statue, which does feature on the monumental meanings poster from the symposium. I'm not sure how to say her name, Sacagawea. So it's by her descendants. This statue, which was very, I find, quite alarming. I'm not sure if something, if anything more is planned than that interpretive kind of update on the plaque. So these are just in the order of actually date, like chronological order, these images, by the way. So that, I think, I'm not sure that jumped back in there, but yeah, because that is a kind of confronting level of like signage, like accurate signage that is not evident in Tasmania in terms of where Aboriginal people were kept, placed, or lived, or massacres, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, just the power of just a simple sign at least is imparting something that's not very evident here. Not evident. That was leaving on my luggage, so a bit shadow. Off on Amtrak. Food again. I thought that was just a wagon, like a wagon coach in Western movies. I didn't realise it was a thing. Wells Fargo. I thought they were. Anyway, that was kind of odd because they were the stagecoaches that got robbed. Yeah, in all the movies we grew up with. So I got a shock. You could still rob a Wells Fargo, but it's an ATM. And then went across with Margot to Richmond, and this travelling exhibition, first time I'd ever seen that. They'd been around the world. It was kind of odd. I thought, here I am seeing this in Virginia, terracotta warriors, great print, so great museums in Richmond. Bird Theatre, oh my God, that was fantastic. The Native American Film Festival, Pocahontas Reframed, and in the cinema, which is usually very retro with historic films. And then, I had this more food. I had an amazing experience with, so I went 3 days there, and then that's when the flags were very evident in Richmond. But this is not like a special occasion. I think it's every day. I might be wrong. So that was really grabbing me and my attention. And pumpkins, yes, but anyway, all pumpkins. There I am with the 1491s. That's like an incredible, they're a group that I, kind of stalk from afar on their YouTube channel, and really recommend watching Slapping Medicine Man on the YouTube as one of their fantastic kind of skit clips on their take on being Native nowadays. So I had a moment with my idols there, then off with Terry Snowball, fantastic time in Washington, and he very generously showed me collections there in the National Museum of the American Indian, where they have also just the canoes that are kind of related to our reed canoes in Tasmania. So it was stunning to see that in real life and think about how the similarities culturally between those in South America and ours in the far south of Tasmania. And contemporary works that were very beautiful and inspiring as well. Food again, nearly finished. Then I was really fortunate that I could visit the Museum of African American History and Culture, so this was Thanksgiving Day. So it was I thought it was interesting as well too. And how interpretively dealing with, history that is not just, so it's built in the manner of kind of multi-leveled ships in its form, it appears. It was reminding me of a similar museum in Liverpool in the UK, which attempts in the same manner to incorporate and encompass all manner of kind of African history on another shore. So in the US and in the UK, it was very much about African history in relation to Liverpool in particular, but that also include the history of slavery and enslavement, and that both museums go to the very present in terms of music, so and popular culture, which it's very sort of, find it strange and interesting when it's going from the depths of despair and horror and then to the positives all in one building. And I'm not sure how that works. Like I'm not sure if that's about that you can't leave on a sad or bad note, or you're meant to, this is your only chance, so pack in all your history in one entity like that. So yeah, really I learned so much just by visiting so many places, having so many experiences and so many generous people with spending time with me, so I could gather not just my own my own thoughts. And the sheer numbers of region by region across the US of transportation and slavery. So then I was wandering around, and Trump Tower next to the CIA or FBI, I mean, that was very confusing as well. I'm not sure if there's a secret tunnel or what. Ilya Kabakov, who's one of the artists I've been inspired by, just manner of construction and looking at stories that might not seem important, but and interior worlds and things like that. And so I'm nearly at running out of time to move to my artworks. This was back I went back several days to the Museum of National Museum of the American Indian, and I was thinking about this, that like in the ground floor you come in and it's a performance space, and Native Americans are kind of decided to, expected to perform culture like on the hour kind of thing, but that was not the case in the African American Museum, which is vastly brand new. But I think there is this tendency to expect Native peoples to do this kind of performative thing, and engagement, and which is kind of, the difference was quite interesting, and I questioned that about where it is that how we meet and share culture, and so I'm a bit troubled by it as well as thinking about it. Beautiful train stations, and then on the bus. Oh no, I'm correct. I think train out Washington, the famous Washington Times. Right, and now quickly going to move into the idea of what's been some response or result of being at kluge-ruhe, and so I'm quickly going through what I've already touched upon, which is the impact and influence of how cross-culturally, and how the very different experiences and cultures of Native American peoples in the US and enslaved peoples and their descendants have worked with their histories, and also how the colonizing entities, i.e. the plantation estates in the US, might how that's influenced how I'm thinking about Tasmania, and how in particular here I think it's more than now found 225 Tasmanian Aboriginal children in the between 1800 and 1850 were living with non-Aboriginal people here. It's been this kind of growing kind of call to me to continue to work out where they were living and under what conditions and how circumstances they came to be in these places. So flicking through images now to show you parts of Tasmania and some works that have resulted. So this is a township in the northeast, eastish Tasmania called Mathina, named after an Aboriginal child that was taken from family members on Flinders Island when our people were exiled around 1830 until 1847. The majority of Tasmania Aboriginal people who survived the first 40 years of colonisation, 30 years of colonisation, were removed there by the government to there. And then Mathina was taken by the governor of Van Diemen's Land and his wife. And all of the texts until recently have kind of made it to be a pleasant story of kind of rescuing her and bringing her into their home to be educated. And but they then went back to England and dumped her in the orphan asylum, where she had a horrific childhood and then subsequently died as a teenager. So this town's named after this girl. And yeah, it's part of the kind of unresolved, horror meets irony of how colonial times are reproduced here in the public imagination and education until recently. So yeah, just working out where are the children and where have they been and where they still seem to be living, in a sense, because we don't know what happened to so many of them. So an earlier work in 2008 where I was trying to accumulate and place together the children as unfinished spears. So just that possibility of becoming adults but not yet being found. So many of them past that period of time when they were trapped in these colonial estates, correspondence, mapping where they were, working on that. So this is since kluge-ruhe, since 2008, thinking and working a little about them, but it's really amplified since that trip because of the seeing that interpretation and possibility of imparting information can happen, and not just in an artist or art sense. I'm interested in it being kind of a more broader activity to instate history as knowledge for people who visit. So my ancestor Dalrymple Briggs was a child on one of these estates, though she was on a smaller grant with a colonist called Jacob Mountgarrett, and the property had no name until he died, and it was absorbed into Brickenden Estate in the north of Tasmania. And she was shot by her master, Mountgarrett, in 1825, and the police magistrate records exist, fortunately, to explain what happened in her words and of some witnesses. So that's fantastic. And these are the kind of stories I think we need to know about across the island. So I created a film which was basically the transcript of the records, of the testimony of the witnesses and of Dalrymple. And the case was dismissed in the end because she herself said her master shot her by mistake, thinking she was a possum, which is entirely unlikely. But what other course of action could she take to, survive in that household again after being taken to the police magistrate? So last year, in the middle of the year, so in June, so now this month, a year ago, I worked with a designer, Margaret Woodward, and produced posters for 185 of the children were that I said Aboriginal children here who lived with colonists were, so there's more, like I said, there's more than 200, but these were the ones we created into the posters, which were placed on cotton paper, so in a forest adjacent to Hobart called the Queen's Domain, which is where Government House is, where the Queen's representative lives today. And it was a way to take it out of the kind of archives and the libraries and even a white gallery, cube space, into reality of ground, of so country, but also disturbing country, that forest. So the children, so yeah, and these images of the boy and the girl are from a colonial artist, Thomas Bock, who produced some monotone watercolours of, and one was a Jemmy and Ginny, so they were a boy and a girl reproduced in a bluish tone. So they've been utilised here as to indicate all the boys and girls. And some there's nothing much except a baptism known, and others to where they survived. There's a couple who survived, including my ancestor, but so many did not, or we don't know where they are. So I think this is one of the key outcomes that could be seen as connected to the visit to kluge-ruhe in Virginia, and seeing the the stories of those that were enslaved within those estates, because there's a parallel between that and these children here. And then, so that was produced and kind of made easier by being part of a festival called the Dark Mofo, which happens until COVID every year around Hobart. And they determined last year they would have a presence up there on that domain. And so there's good and bad in what happened, which was it facilitated and became really easy to engage and install there, but it also brought a crowd of people that were there for a kind of night, for other events on the domain, and a different attitude than I would have probably preferred, in a sense of who's engaging with the work and are they taking it as some, for me it's incredibly somber, sad and problematic history to think about. So yeah, it was a way to test and trial and think about the work and the children up there. But I think there's more places and times to undertake work like this. This other work, I'm going okay for time, 12 minutes or so left. This is also a work late last year completed, and also can be seen as kind of relating to the visit, in that I materially have thought more broadly since I returned, not because I tend to make a lot of video work, but that poster series was also part of a solo exhibition I had at the same time, which was a retrospective of my work over 25 years, held in the museum in Hobart in TMAG, which so it was a kind of parallel and outdoor work at the same time, which is fantastic because I prefer not to always be in gallery settings. I like to be in historic or site-specific places that are part of the story that, themselves. But and this series is about having an artist residency since I've been back at one of those colonial estates called Woolmer's Estate, which is adjacent to where my ancestor was shot. And the land that she was shot on, called Dalrymple, lived and fortunately survived to have a large family from whom I'm descended. But this is a Woolmer's Estate, and it ended up being, that belonged to the Archer family, well-known historic family, landholders, 5 land grants, early days of the colony here. So this residency led, and in a way was a kind of like reminding me while I was there of the whole Virginian experience. I found that the people there are not versed or willing to engage and talk about what isn't carefully scripted already about the Archer family, and Aboriginal people don't enter into any conversation at all there, or knowledge. So yeah, this idea of tourism and on historic places, which kind of denies or prevents true stories emerging, but as I said, over Monticello, etc., it's happening in a way that I think needs to be amplified here. So one of the works that resulted from being here at this place, a kilometre from where my ancestor was living and survived from. This was also, the stories that you hear in these places here are the stories of the convicts. So the unfortunate, the people that are allowed to kind of be presented are the Anglo and relocated British who, transported for crime. They, in a sense, replace us as the alternative story to the landholders. And this is also, there's a strange parallel when you think of the US and Virginia, which is that it does happen there in the way that kluge-ruhe would be well known would be that the Native American, the story that can kind of rise in the more recently, sort of like who are the more recently oppressed, the convicts in a sense, and we were just before that almost. If you sort of, is it one story is allowed to be there of the suppressed, so the convicts have taken our place in a way in the interpretation across this island. And then I felt in Virginia, the enslaved others, the alternative story, and the Monacan presence and the Native American presence is suppressed there. It's a feeling that you have that is a bit parallel to here, but I can't, it's not a comfortable thing to say, but it's just something that kind of was occurring to me over there as well. There's something about how what has happened with Native peoples here and there is yeah, the space is taken here by convict stories and people wanting those. It's not culturally parallel, but it's just a way of ordering history and how many complex stories are allowed to take, be there and take precedence. And there seems to be some rule that you can't have more than one suppressed story at a time, at a time maybe, and that needs to change because there's many stories that need to be told, really.
Yeah, or almost like they're layers of history, and it's like we can only look at the more recent ones, and until those are gone,
Yeah.
we can't see the ones beneath, or some kind
Yeah.
of assumption like that.
Yeah, we need to figure out where are the gaps, who isn't speaking and why, and not to punish or think, not to engage in, the oppressed oppressing other oppressed, or feeling it's just a way of opening up history to make sure that, because these what are on these walls are those of the convicted people. Like, we are erased from this estate, and currently all the estates, I think. So what I made was, there was a series of 4 etchings, which with the Australian Print Workshop in Melbourne. And so there was a great experience where I was reflecting on the stories of, this is one child, Fanny Hardwick, who lived at an estate that was nearer to about 6 miles away. This is the hut where my ancestor was shot, but it's been since relocated to Woolmers, which is really bizarre anyway. That's physically transitioned, translocated across the river. So yeah, etchings, which were copper plates, which I produced, where I kind of modified and moved elements of my life story and those of some of the children onto the historic art, copied the historic artworks and included our missing stories in them. So attempted murder, that's of my ancestor being surviving, and I've moved the hut, I've moved myself into that artwork, and Aboriginal people and the witnesses. So just completely modified existing historic works and this one is a story from the east coast of Tasmania, which exists in sketches and in oil painting of a colonist being attacked by Aboriginal people, but I kind of, in an ironic twist, changed that, and that's now a winery estate, changed that into me being attacked by historians as a kind of bizarre twist while I was at Woolmers creating that work. So yeah, I'm kind of in the middle of a whole batch of historians because they're kind of like a bit of a plague who speak for us instead of giving us space to speak for ourselves. So so there's a kind of bizarre irony which matches my...
Yeah, Julie, I just want to share someone, Deanne, just put a comment in the Q&A saying she just had a statement about her visit to Tasmania last year. She said, I was greeted by a mayor and no mention of First Nations peoples at all. As an Aboriginal woman myself, I felt your history is left out and felt sad for you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so difficult because, I don't want to speak on behalf of 20,000 Tasmanian Aboriginal people either. It's sort of like, how do we in a consensus manner insert ourselves across the island in a way that we want to do so, and also that so many monuments, for example, and ways that the West works in presenting history and things of importance are so physically weighty, and I wonder about that, and whether that also might be part of that reticence or a sense of us engaging on our terms, and in what are our terms, and do we want things that are cement and brick and cast bronze, or are there ways to put things up that change through time, about our history and what we want to share across the island about what has happened and who we are, and etc. So yeah, that's me in the green shirt, in the holding a spear, sort of protecting myself from the onslaught of historians, because they kind of breed and they supervise the next generation, and in their kind of homes, which are academia. Really, anyway, I have a little sense of sometimes frustration in their words being quoted back at us, about us, etc. So then this work was about one of those estates and Wedge was a notorious colonist surveyor, and this was I don't know how to go back now. oh yeah, there I have crows in the re-etched version. Our ancestors are crows, so I've replaced what the watercolor was, or the painting by Wedge by Glover, as our ancestors as crows, and words that were yelled back at the colonists coming from the crows in defiance. So, and so that's also, yeah, just how to engage with things that are already in the world and say we can change them. We don't have to just keep looking at them. We can make our own versions of them. This is from these were panel. This was I don't know the original story. This is about the children that were taken and living with colonists, taken from our peoples. And here I've had to trace them back, write them backwards in the copper, which was a little challenging. And yeah. So it's part of a panel that was placed on trees to communicate to Aboriginal people. The top left image is part of a proclamation panel saying we should all be buddies and friends and hold each other's hands. And so I don't take that too well. The sentiment of the panel, I think, is, yeah, coming from where it came from, is a bit insulting. So also this film I'm making at present, some images about some of the children. And again, I think in part is reflective of that visit to the US. So just in answering your question. And I'm running out of time to show much more, but this is a one girl. So a lot of the works that exist from those times are also in themselves problematic in the way that they caricature or parody our people, with no sensitivity or so bringing images like this almost out of the archives or the art archives is difficult, in that might be the only trace of a child is something such as this. There's these, but I think, I want to face them. And so in this instance, I drove to where she was living, this girl whose real name was Tebrikunna, and placed and filmed at the gate of the property where she had been held. And then a car pulled up with 4 young women, and they pulled up into the driveway, and they had their kind of neat special hair and clothes that I knew that's where they lived. The kind of and I was ready for a confrontation, and this is really interesting because I think I'm kind of ready for battle. And what happened was they wound the window down of their car and asked what I was doing, kind of, with this image in the name of their property, basically. And I explained, as I explained in as many sentences as it needed, which briefly, really, though, what I was doing across the island, like reinstating stories and knowledge of the children, like Tubalongata. And then they actually got a little kind of, they actually thanked me and asked and said, please keep doing this. So that was a surprise, because I said to them, I said, I think if you were a generation or 2 older, I wouldn't have had this kind of engagement with you. Like, I actually think it would have been a threatening experience for me and difficult one for them. And I think that shows, if I'm on the ground across the island, that there's kind of hope, and I can get recharged not just by country, but by the possibility of, positive relationships happening. Because originally this girl was dumped. She was disposed of for being disobedient from that property, but the current landholders are not related to the original, so I don't suppose they have that investment and paranoia about being outed,
And
so
was that work, Julie, a finished work, or is that the one that's being edited right now?
Yeah, it's being edited. Well, I've sent it off to see, if it's, so it's a kind of partly commission where I've just waiting for feedback, because I think it's ready to go, but I'm just not sure about whether I need to add more sound. It's a voiceover with only one sound at the end about my process of working. And and I don't know if it was tricky to add other sound. So I'm just waiting for feedback on that, actually, that work. So it's pretty good to go and then hopefully I can send links out to that work when it's completed. Because I think all my other films are already on YouTube channel. I'm just quickly flick through without saying much. This was last year at the same time as Missing or Dead, the children in the forest.
Really quick, before you go on to this exhibition, there's a question about that project. So Margot says, I think it's very effective to bring these images of children back to, I think she meant country and film them there. Do you actually leave the images to last as long as they will and be seen by passersby, or do you take them with you after filming?
Yeah, it was really, So the first child, Fanny Hardwick here, I was more tempted to leave her there. That property doesn't have a name. There's no one living. That's just sheds there now. At that point I was tempted to leave her there, but I'm not. I can't. I can't do that. I can't leave them there. It felt wrong to. It's kind of, it's weird, but the object becomes them when you're carrying them around the island with you, etc. So I brought them home, but I have left images across the island of stone tools that have been where I think that they were taken from to the UK. So they were left in situ, photographs of stone tools as a previous work about, just the longing of reconnecting country, those missing tools to where they came from, in some instances sitting right next to tools that weren't taken. So there has been moments when I have left something, but not with these children. No, I couldn't do it. But they're also copies of the original, they're prints of the original works.
We have one other question, but do you want to introduce that exhibition really quickly, and then we'll go on to these few questions that we have?
Yeah. So this is just flicking through fortunately, I was invited by Mary Knights, the Senior Curator of Art at TMAG in Hobart, where I now work, she curated the retrospective of and it was called Tense Past. So it was a particular series of works, not all, or not an overview of different series that don't fit this, which was pretty much about the gloomy and avoided past of this island, in a sense, my perspective on what has happened to our peoples, and also recent works with myself and my brother, etc. So just how different ways of looking at, through different mediums over the years, our presence here and what kind of cross-cultural interactions happened in this island. But fortunately, because it was in the State Museum, I could work with the collections easily that were already in the institution. So colonial artworks of colonists that are usually lauded like renowned colonists. But here I've got a work next to them that I've made about them taking an Aboriginal child, for example, that's not easily found in the literature. So the stories of objects that otherwise are not made clear. So just working through, and stone tools in the collections there. And the curator, Mary Knights, also was able to raise enough funding to bring objects from other states such as the original of Tubalongta, the watercolour on the left, from South Australia. So she came back temporarily to Tasmania. So it was amazing to have the opportunity to see many artworks together that have already, never been before together, or usually are sent away to an exhibition in a group exhibition sense. So rarely have I shown many of my works together. So this was really interesting. And also then the whole gallery spaces became almost like versions of colonial homes in a way, that there was the furniture, the historic works, my works, all combined, which is what the kind of history that I want to be able to, for this island to show. In this, so nearly, I learnt and sang a song and language from this historic sheet music. So that was also really important for me. Yeah, so putting together the parts that are pulled apart usually and not made clear, the bigger stories of the places, and these, again, colonial homesteads. A designed carpet, that's a designed carpet from Woolmer's estate wallpaper, and Margaret Woodward, who I've mentioned, a designer, worked with Margaret, and we produced a design that was printed by a carpet company for free, which was incredible for this whole room. And so it's the exploded wallpaper of Woolworths and fragments, which with silverfish in there, because the whole of the real wallpaper is chewed up with by silverfish. I think how many more? I'm not sure. Just keep flicking through. So that at the moment, I'm really fortunate to have recently received a grant to work with a designer to create a publication about this exhibition, and also there's 5 essays that have been written. So that's so it's after the fact, but that's fine. I think it's in its own time meant to be afterwards. So that will come out by the end of this year, hopefully, a small publication.
Great.
Yeah, I don't know then.
You're so prolific.
So yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, it's a lot. It's 20. It's a lot of. It was a lot of years, and I think I'm not sure the earliest work, but maybe 97, 90. There's maybe not. Yeah, not sure. It's 25 years anyway. Yeah, 95. And yeah, that was also what that video has been created since kluge-ruhe, which was about country across this island, Langurna. So the colour of country. And in that instance, I'm responding to this publication in front of the video, which is held in the museum in South Australia usually, where it has a little brown patch of painted cardboard and says this is the colour of Tasmanian Aboriginal people, which is not accurate now. And also, but just shows the kind of crazed pointlessness of trying to pinpoint culture by colour that the colonists were, in kind of, they were embedded in and determined to work in that manner with otherness. So the film has been a response to that. And so you can see the hill on the top left image is one of the places I return to, that special place. But yeah, so how objects and places and stories and people kind of inspire and provoke art is so interesting, and one never comes out of nothing. They always come from something previous, so it's all life's journey really.
One of our volunteers, Julie, had a comment just on the project with the images of the children going back to the estates. She said she didn't have a question, she just wanted to say that she loves you for taking them home and not leaving them out there, those images in the estate. So I just wanted to let you know that feedback. But then we also have a question from Mike Coffin, who is saying, your and Judy Watson's oeuvre, as well as that of many other Aboriginal artists, strike me as both intensely personal and tragic, in that you bring horrendous experiences from only a few generations ago, enslavements and kidnappings, torture, murder, massacres, etc., of family ancestors. This experience and context seem very different to those of the vast majority of artists who are working around the world today. Thus, your work, in addition to having aesthetic and historical attributes, could also be considered political. Could you comment on this and what impacts you'd ideally like your work to have? It's a big question.
Yeah. So that was great. That's really, that's a lot to digest. Other people have spoken and written about, Aboriginal artists have spoken about, that same question of, is all Aboriginal art political? Can Aboriginal art be apolitical? Like, just by being presented to non-native peoples, it's that's a political act of, survival and often defiance or questioning or provoking. If it's made for our own peoples, that's different. And I'm sure most artists make work for themselves, their homes, their friends and families. But there's so much of us that is produced to engage, and it's difficult because I've been called didactic artist, and that idea of the impetus to educate is problematic, and it can weaken the art of the art. It can weaken some things, but sometimes it's worth testing or trading some of the art for a little bit more of the education. I think there's a kind of spectrum of possibility for what we make and who we make it for and what reason. And most of my family probably are not going to art galleries that often, and some are, but there's that sense that the majority audience, given that's the majority population, are non-First Peoples here. We are kind of, I think, I'm kind of going along with the idea that I have to be happy with what I'm making, but also that it's, I want to inform people about the gaps and reflect. I really would like everyone to know who they are and where they come from. What is their place and position, and not avoid these things in their lives.
We also have a question, Julie, from Nancy, who asked a while ago, can you comment on Henry Reynolds' book, Why Weren't We Told, and your reaction to it? Have you read that? Do you have feelings about that book?
I actually have that book, but I have not read that book, which is, I could have just said no, but I better say, it's in the bookshelf. I haven't read that book, but for some reason I haven't read that book. I've read a couple of his other books. And he comes from the era when, we needed historians to assist and actually explain, like how to access what are these archives, what are these places where information is held. So opening doors, critical. I mean, and this is from the 70s, so I'm not in my image of the etching. I'm not attacking Henry with the spear, an attack of historians, but I'm thinking about since Henry as the problematic of the breeding, kind of the ever enlarging pool of historians speaking on our behalf without our permission. But I can't really answer Nancy there because I haven't read the book.
Oh, that's great. If anybody else has any other questions, feel free to send them through to the Q&A. Otherwise, Julie, if you wanted to share what the rest of your PowerPoint, people are welcome to leave, or if they want to stay, they can. I'm interested in hearing more. So
I think it's the last image. Yeah,
that was the last image. So
yeah.
Well, if there are more questions, send them in. There are a few more just responses. Someone said, I have so enjoyed getting to know you tonight and knowing the depth of feeling and care that you have for the work you are doing. Thank you for these important gifts you are giving your culture, but it is also a huge gift for us.
Thank you.
And Margot says, thank you, Julie. So glad your forthcoming book will share your retrospective exhibition and your life's work with a broader audience. So, good.
Thanks. Yeah, there was also in the last year a book produced on my art generally by UWA in West Australia, UWA Press, which is called Fugitive History. So that's available, and it's a broader project than Tense Past. It's also an earlier period when I made work that was more, kind of more kitsch, right? I went through a period of looking at Aboriginalia or representations of us and reworking those. So that book, Fugitive History, is kind of more inclusive, but doesn't reach Tense Past, if you know what I mean. It has those artworks in it, though. Most of those artworks are in Fugitive History, in case people are interested in that.
Someone else is saying, thanks again for your guided tour of Tense Past last year. So they got to participate in that, which is good.
I really found that very useful in a way, because I rarely engage with an audience face to face, and I think I gave something like 6 or 7, quite a few tours, and some people stayed behind who were from the colonial landed gentry population, so they found their own courage to stay and speak with me and kind of confess about their anxieties and their guilt, and this was very powerful for me to have that experience with them.
Yeah, I personally felt like your perspective on Monticello is so interesting, because I think a lot of people still, even some artists who have come to kluge-ruhe, have remarked that it feels like it's still lacking something, that acknowledgement of that history. And so I think it's interesting that you're seeing it through quite a positive lens of, this interpretation is present, and there is the storytelling, and there is a sense of represencing, and I think that perspective was really interesting too.
Well, what was the other plantation? What was the other estate I went to? Because I've forgotten
You
the name.
went to Montpelier. Montpelier.
That's it. Thank you. Yes,
James
sorry.
Madison.
Yeah, that was fantastic. With Nancy, or no, who did I go? I went to Montpelier, and that had much more kind of integrated and louder African American presence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Montpelier. But
I think you went with
Monticello.
Christine, who was trying to join. Yeah, she was trying to join earlier, so we'll send her this recording.
Yeah, Christine. Sorry, who was fantastic. Because that was unexpected, and I really think I needed a second kind of version, a second plantation, to just get my head around what's happening in inclusion of African American history there. And Montpelier was not as up to date, and also what was very fascinating was the awkwardness of the live guides, the non-African American guides, who were awkward in saying, kind of sending us off on our own. I think we had to go off on my own kind of tour and then meet up with someone to take the extra tour. Like, they were not integrated, and it was clear that
at Monticello or at Montpelier.
Monticello was, I'm pretty sure that was very segregated.
Yes.
And that the guide of the house was very, immaculately, the coiffured hair and the clothing, kind of upper class, non-African American person, who kind of, I could tell they were going through their own, kind of personal evolution, personal life change in accepting that other story was being told there. Yeah. And so there was an awkwardness there, but I appreciated that, because that's then mirroring outside the plantation and saying things aren't right, and we're gonna not make it all great. And I mean, as in all integrated and everything's comfortable here. You kind of got handed over to the second tour. Yeah. And so I did find that, I thought that was kind of useful, not in showing there's still a problem. That, like, one person could, but I wonder, like, what if there were 4 options or 3 options? And because I would want to tour the house, all of the house with the African American guide, not just this enslavement quarters, whatever, so the big house is still for the kind of wealthy Anglo people to describe and take you through. So things still need to shift there, definitely.
Yeah, we had a part-time employee who worked at kluge-ruhe for a little while and also at Monticello, and she talked about how quickly that they have to move people through the house, and how it does create really awkward circumstances because they can't really address a lot of big issues in that space when they're expected to take people through so quickly. So I know that that's definitely a limitation that is felt from at least some of the guides there, but
I think you could choose who is your guide, what I mean, like, that's, which you can't at the moment, like, so you kind of got one view of it,
the whole thing.
Thanks though for this, having a major flashback about it now.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. Oh, Fenella, did you have
I just wanted to say, Julie, I think you're right on track about the trajectory of a place like Monticello, that there is a continuum, and they are on this continuum of educating themselves as well as the public. And so you end up with people working there and employed who are on different places of that continuum. And so I think you read that really well. I just wanted to reinforce that.
There's a kind of honesty in the awkwardness, which I think it's useful.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I think it's useful for lots of reasons, because I think everybody is on a different part of that journey, and it's good that Monticello is embracing their guides who are on different, in different places in that journey. Well, Julie, this has been so fascinating. Thank you so much. We don't have any other questions. Somebody else said thank you so much, so that's good. And we really appreciate all of your wisdom and your knowledge that you've shared with us today. And it's really great to see all of the new work that you and the exhibitions. I'm still just always astounded by how much you produce in in a fairly short period of time. So thank you so much. If you want to stay on for a little bit, we can, in case anybody else has more questions. But otherwise, I think somebody else said thank you. Tina says thank you, Julie, for taking us on your artistic journey from Tassie to the States. The Tassie again, fantastic presentation.
Thanks.
Lauren says thank you, Julie, for sharing your amazing work. So a lot of people enjoyed.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah. It's cold here. I don't know what we're at. I think 13-degree maximum. That's Celsius.
Oh, it was like 30 here today, Julie.
What number is it there?
Like 30 today. It was warm.
Is that 30 Celsius?
Yeah.
Oh my God. 30. Yeah, you can do that. Wow. Yeah, I've got to put my feet are cold here. Okay. Anyway, we'll keep in touch. Yeah.
Hearing you talk about the monumental meanings program too made me remember that we got finally the recording that was recorded, but it wasn't recorded. We didn't get the recording until like a year and a half later or something. There was some kind of issue with the people we hired to do that. So we have a kluge-ruhe staff member, Ed, who is doing a lot of video work for us right now. So maybe we'll have him work with that file and get it up onto our YouTube channel, because I think it's a good time to sort of bring that up from the archive and look back at what that moment was like. So thanks for bringing that up and for participating in that too. It's really great.
No, thank you for organising it. That was amazing. And meeting Karen, meeting different people, yeah, was really special. That otherwise I don't know, I'm fairly reclusive, and quiet, so not sure how those, that was really special, because I was otherwise having a very, enslaved Virginian history experience. So because of what's happened there and here, very much with First Nations people's stories being still pretty hidden.
Mm-hmm. Somebody else says, many thanks, Julie. I'm really appreciating your insights and stories. So,
oh, thanks.
Mandy said that.
I'm gonna go make coffee now.
Go for it. Yeah, it's early there. Well, thank you so much, Julie. I'll be in touch. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Hi, Julie. So nice to see you. Thank you.